gives us the... Yep.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Meadville Tribune. The person you see on the screen right now is Preston Nouri. He is candidate for Congress, 16th District, which represents northwestern Pennsylvania. He's the Democratic nominee in the race. The voice you hear is myself, Keith Gushard, and with me is Rick Green, our editor. We'll be asking Mr. Nouri some questions related to the district and the constituency in a few moments, but we'll start off. Mr. Nouri, we'll give you a couple minutes to give a little background about yourself.
Thanks so much, Rick. Thanks so much, Keith, for having me here today. For those who haven't got the chance to know me, I hope to be able to know you at the end of it. My name is Preston Nouri, Democratic nominee for U.S. Congress here in the 16th District. Born and raised here in northwestern Pennsylvania. Grew up in Erie, graduated from public schools out there. Then after that, I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh, top of my class, and then went down to D.C. I've worked on Capitol Hill in the House of Representatives. I've worked at the State Department in diplomatic security, and then most recently I finished up a 2-year stint over at the Pentagon in legislative and congressional oversight. I got the chance to see the ground level of the sausage being made. I saw over $1 trillion being appropriated out. I got to see what was going on, and long story short, when it comes down to Western Pennsylvania, we're not getting the resources that we desperately need here in this area. We are current at one of the reasons as to why I even got in this race in the first place was got friends and family working 65 hours a week, taking care of his kids, taking care of his mom, but push comes to shove, he's not able to save for a house. Their costs have increased in such a way that we are seeing normal people, working families, suffering at such a rate that we're not able to really recover in an authentic way. This is the first time that this upcoming generation will have a worse socioeconomic status than their parents. And we need to make sure that we can create something for this future. I've appropriated out tremendous amounts of money. I've seen the opportunities we have in DC with the CHIPS Act, with the Inflation Reduction Act, with the infrastructure bill, for somebody that is willing to sit down at the appropriations tables and hound them to the ground to make sure that the money actually comes back home, to stand up opportunities and make sure that manufacturing, agriculture, and the cornerstones here of this community are able to authentically get taken care of. I mean, we need to make sure that we forge a better future here in an area that's been, quite honestly, forgotten.
For people who aren't too familiar with you, as a Democrat, do you describe yourself as kind of a true blue Democrat where you'll go along with the party line, or you see yourself more as a blue dog Democrat who crosses party lines where needed?
So I consider myself as an American, first and foremost here. It's not about partisanship. I mean, I run as a Democrat since I believe my ideals align more closely with the Democratic Party, but what it comes down to is my dad's a Republican. I've got a lot of friends and family here in my entire coalition here who are independents, Republicans. I mean, the 16th district in and of itself, and also politics generally, has become incredibly divisive around partisanship when we all have our kids going to the same schools. We all go to the same hospitals. We all live in the community together. We need to make sure that we try to have some semblance of unity, right? I mean, a congressman's supposed to solve the biggest problems, or at least try to solve some of the biggest problems that are facing the area. Bring back some money to make sure that not Democrats are getting jobs or Republicans are getting jobs, but people in Western Pennsylvania are getting jobs. If it's good for the people of my district, I'm going to support it. Whether or not that goes along with the party line, it doesn't really matter. The people here who are going to send me to Washington are going to be the people here in the 16th district. The 720 to 730,000 people here, the 350-ish thousand people who are going to vote. Hopefully we can get more of them engaged here. I mean, push comes to shove, we need to make sure that we go beyond partisanship and actually just focus on the issues here.
Well, one of the biggest issues is inflation.
Absolutely.
It's been up. It started to slow. Now, the latest 12-month stat that I saw for the period that ended in September was that inflation had slowed down to 2.4% on an annual basis, and that was the lowest it had been since February of 21. So how can the rate of inflation be slowed, and how do you see combating inflation?
So I think that aside from combating inflation, we need to tackle costs rising overall, right? Inflation's one part of it, the picture here, but also we have verifiable studies. That's not my opinion, but the Congressional Budget Office and other outlets have put out that corporate price gouging and monopolistic behavior that we've seen here during that pandemic has caused costs to rise beyond inflation. We're seeing where people who have the opportunity to be in a monopoly and take advantage of that power have utilized that in a way to push costs in such a way that it's almost untenable even as inflation rises. I think that it comes down to how can we deal with that is one, dealing with corporate price gouging to help with one aspect of cost. And then also two, I think it's trying to put more money in people's pockets here, right? In Erie County, we had GE and Zurn. They were about 35,000 jobs between the two of them. That $50,000 to $250,000 job range in terms of salary. I mean, that's what put roofs over people's head and put food on the table. And we need to make sure that more of those opportunities are coming back so families are able to actually deal with inflation. A perfect example is when I was talking about earlier. My friend, he's working 65 hours a week. He's a tradesman, takes care of his mom, takes care of his kids, and he works hard and he works often. But what it comes down to is we need opportunities with wages that are commensurate with able to deal with inflation in an authentic way.
Okay, but you talk about combating price gouging.
Yes.
How do you do that?
One, it comes down to a couple things. One, making sure that we can reduce monopolistic behavior and also reducing the monopolistic influence, right? So we've seen Lena Khan try to go out here with some of these mergers that we see that are potentially coming that are also going to cause more monopolistic behavior to happen, right? We also need to go bring back the idea of seeing where are we having some of these monopolistic behaviors. We saw it at the grocery store with the infant formula shortage that we had here, where there was one producer who was making 80-something% of formula here in the United States. How can we as the federal government try to intercede and provide more resources for some of these critical areas? Some areas are getting subsidies, some areas aren't getting subsidies here. And without going into the nuanced minutia here, it comes down to how can we make sure that the earmarks that we are subsidizing these industries here are able to effectively pass on the subsidies to the benefits of the subsidies onto the consumer and not just directly onto some of these monopolies that we're seeing.
Okay, but are you talking legislatively?
Yeah, well, there's legislative control. There's also executive orders that could be had here. There's a lot of different means and methods to try to take care of this problem, but push comes to shove, we need to do it sooner rather than later.
So would one trigger be price controls, like put a cap on what a company could charge for formula, cereal?
Yeah, I mean, we see some real strong success with that in the pharmaceutical industries in particular. I mean, we see where insulin costs, just a handful of dollars to make, and they're charging in Canada, a smaller multiplier compared to here in the United States. And we've seen they go in front of Congress here and they say, could you reduce it down and still make a considerable profit? Yes, absolutely we can. But they still don't, right? We need to make sure that there's some real teeth here in the federal government to make sure that the consumer isn't getting the effects of price gouging.
The national deficit is top of many lists for voters. $35 trillion,
Yep.
maybe, kind of rounding it. How do you tackle that? What can be done to lower that? Because at some point there's going to be a tipping point where not going to be able to sustain that, just print dollars.
So in terms of, first I want to make sure that we draw the comparison between my plan for trying to tackle the national debt and Mr. Kelly's plan. Him and the Republican Study Committee came out with $5.5 trillion in tax breaks for the 1%, trying to privatize Medicare, raise the age of Social Security, deny people pre-existing conditions, and use some of these benefits and offsets from the costs of raising the age and creating certain caps here to then try to tackle the deficit. $5.5 trillion in tax breaks does not tackle our national debt. Under the past administration, we saw a 25% increase, or 25% of our national debt was incurred in those 4 years. How we tackle them is trying to make sure that we cut the fat where we see it. Perfect example, while I was working at the Pentagon here, I got to appropriate out $1.2 trillion. And what it came down to is every single year we're wasting $45 billion to $55 billion every single year on $10,000 hammers, $20,000 bolts, particular weapon system programs that have invoices where you legitimately can see $10,000 hammers on there, the one that you would go buy from Home Depot, not something specialized here. We're talking about where the federal government's generosity in making sure that our national defense is secured is causing us to hemorrhage dollars, where it's genuinely paying for corruption. And that kind of money will allow us to be able to try to tackle the national deficit in a real way. First, we need to make sure that the money that we are spending is actually working for us, and then after that, make sure we can take some of that and try to go tackle our biggest problems.
For years, decades, I've heard complaints about the Pentagon charging thousands of dollars for hammers, and nothing ever gets done with it. How do you make that happen?
Well, so while I was working at the Pentagon, I worked in the front office for the Undersecretary of Acquisition and Sustainment. I got to see if you wanted something and if you wanted it to be there tomorrow, that was our purview. I got to see a really nuanced way of how this was particularly laid out. And without getting into too much of the nuances here, when back in the early 2000s and 2010s and we said the government was too big and we need to make some cuts, well, we cut the auditors. We cut the auditors from the defense agency, who were the ones who were making sure that the money that we were wasting was actually not being wasted here. Though you can just look at the Defense Contract Management Agency in terms of their employment here. It's clear as day where some of these areas are getting cut. Biggest thing we need to do is have accountability, have more auditors, allow for people who are actually the watchdogs of this kind of greed. Be the watchdogs. Have some teeth to be able to make sure that some of that money comes back home so that we actually can see a real return on our investment. I have absolutely no problem making sure that our troops are paid for, that salary benefits for our troops, especially with the variety of issues that soldiers are dealing with right now, especially enlisted folks. I've got friends who are personally enlisted now. We need to make sure we're taking care of them instead of some of these major defense contractors who are the ones who are getting those $10,000 hammers.
Well, keeping with the theme of defense, right now Israel is continuing air and ground campaigns against Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They recently told the U.S. that if we hit Iran, it'll be just their military sites in retaliation for the attacks on Israel. The U.S. is sending Israel the THAAD missile system with about 100 troops from the U.S. Are you concerned about a potential widening of the conflict in the Middle East that may drag in the U.S.?
I am. I genuinely am. We are seeing, and I think that we've seen the Secretary Blinken a number of times saying that I wasn't aware of this particular strike or this particular operation. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin here, unaware of operations that we're doing with American equipment and American missiles. Right now, I'm genuinely concerned that the Netanyahu government is trying to barrel towards a war instead of trying to bring home hostages and have peace happen. We see genuine concerns from a variety of generals and other strategists here in the region. Push comes to shove, what needs to happen first is make sure we can have some semblance of peace. People, and not myself, not anybody else, the International Criminal Court of Justice is saying that this is one of the greatest humanitarian disasters of the 21st century. And push comes to shove, if we continue in this militaristic way, we will see a broader conflict that could really drag in the U.S., and I'm genuinely concerned for it. We need to make sure that peace, prosperity, and the ending of hostilities is our priority.
How would that happen? Would it be controlling purse strings kind of thing?
I think that it's we have an opportunity. It starts at the top of the ticket. It starts with the president trying to engage as the commander-in-chief and top diplomat of the United States, trying to engage with the Netanyahu government, trying to say, listen, this is a humanitarian catastrophe. What are we going to do to solve this? And I know they just issued a statement, a joint letter where Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin said they would have an arms embargo in 30 days if there was no improvement in the situation in Gaza. I think it comes down to how we do this. There's, as with a lot of things, a lot of different ways to do it. But first and foremost, I think that an arms embargo and letting them know, I mean, Secretary Austin, Secretary Blinken were very clear that if we don't see improvements here, we will not be the ones who are fronting the bill. Because at the end of the day, we've appropriated out $18.9 billion to Israel since October 7th, while FEMA had a $9 billion shortfall in covering the damages from Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene. We need to make sure that we take care of folks, and I want to make sure we take care of folks. But we need to make sure we're able to take care of people here and make sure that humanity and peace and the ideals that America was founded on are actually enshrined in the actions that we're following through on.
Sticking with foreign conflicts, Ukraine and its war with Russia, have we done enough to supply arms, money to Ukraine in its battle there?
We've given, I think right now it's 98 billion or something to that effect here. I mean, we very clearly know that this is a aggressor campaign where Russia has directly infringed on the sovereignty of Ukraine and has been in this incredibly bloody conflict for a while now. I mean, we have the responsibility as the United States to make sure that the influence and the problems that we see abroad do not end up coming to our shores. We have a security responsibility through NATO in that region here. I will say that the biggest thing, though, that I am concerned about is the $9 billion in shortfall funding that FEMA just had, and the amount of money and the $160-odd billion that's going to need to repair Appalachia here after these hurricanes. I want to make sure that we're able to help folks all around this world, right? But first and foremost here, I want to make sure that the people who I know are in very similar circumstances to here. We live in Appalachia, and there's people in western North Carolina who also live in Appalachia who right now still do not have power, who right now are just finally getting food and water here. Their lives aren't getting back to normal anytime soon. And I think that while we need to make sure that we protect Ukraine and protect our interests in the region in a real authentic way, that we also center humanity as what we need to do here, address our conflicts here at home, address the conflicts abroad, but make sure that we have some real fiscal responsibility with it.
Well, security and everything. What about border security? A lot of voters are upset with border security and illegal border crossings. What can be done? And also, it's not just the southern border, the northern border. I mean, the U.S. border with Canada is, 5,400 miles, I think?
Something like that.
Like that, it's unguarded. People are concerned about it. When you get to Congress, what are you going to propose or do?
Well, first and foremost, I want to highlight the fact that we had a border package that was crafted by an incredibly conservative member of the Oklahoma Senate, a senator from Oklahoma, who crafted this bill. We had a package with bipartisan support that was shot down because it was then used as a political talking point to be used here in this election. Democrats and Republicans know that it's a humanitarian disaster what's going on down at the southern border. People are not safe. We don't know what's going on. It's the only people right now that the current system is benefiting is traffickers and people who are trying to bring people in a non-proper way, right? We need to authentically deal with it. We had a package that dealt with it, and it was tanked.
That package was
to deal
only
with
about a year or two ago. I mean, what about the prior 2 years? I mean, there were many crossings prior to that, and the Democrats had the House, the Senate, presidency, and that increased, I don't know how many fold. Why wasn't anything done at that point?
I'm not here to answer for the people down in Washington right now. I'm here to answer to the people here in Western Pennsylvania, and I'm here to tell them what I'm here to try to do about what we have going on. My grandparents came here from my grandmother came here from Poland. She was in Auschwitz. She came here through Ellis Island when the Catholic Church sponsored her to come out here to Western Pennsylvania. My dad came here right before here in the 1970s here as an immigrant from Central Asia. We're here right now in an area where this nation has been made up of immigrants, and it's important to make sure that we can try and take care of that. And I'm not here to try to answer for why things weren't happening. We've known that there has not been a comprehensive bill to address the border situation since the 80s, and for a very long time the border situation has needed to be changed. And I think that, quite frankly, trying to see some of the benefits that came out of this most recent package, that it was a bipartisan package here to say, okay, what can we use here? What can we actually implement to actually take care of some of these problems? I think is where we need to focus on. I want to make sure that when I get down to D.C. that we take care of the problems here. If we have a House, a Senate, and a presidency, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that we actually get some work done. We just had one of the most inefficient Congresses in the history of Congress. The 118th was declared one of the most inefficient Congresses. And with that being the current circumstance, RD or I think that the American people need to understand that we need new people in there to make sure that Congress can actually start trying to run here and solve some of these problems that we're dealing with. In regards to the northern border, the catastrophe that we're seeing right now at the southern border compared to what we're dealing with at the northern border, in my opinion, let's try to deal with the southern border first in a real way, and then we can go try to focus on other borders. Because right now we know which one has the humanitarian catastrophe, the illegal operations behind it here in the way that we've seen here for years.
If you get elected, I think the way how narrow the majority is for Republicans right now, it would stand to reason that power would flip to Democrats. Who would you support for the Speaker of the House?
Right now, I would support. I don't think whoever. I know who would be the Speaker of the House. Hakeem Jeffries has the votes to be the Speaker of the House, regardless of whether or not I have a particular opinion. I think that he has effectively been able to get some really strong accomplishments done. The CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Bill, the Inflation Reduction Act generally are real wins to run on. Bipartisanly, we see money that's available to create semiconductors and battery manufacturing plants in areas that are desperately crying to have their manufacturing shoes filled. Cleveland just made a battery manufacturing plant. They took some money from the CHIPS Act to actually stand up there. Why don't we have it come back home? When it comes down to the Speaker of the House, it's going to be Hakeem Jeffries regardless of what I say. And honestly, I think he's done a good job to earn the gavel.
So you would vote for him then?
We'll see who else is up there, but I would vote for him. He's done a fine job so far and has done some real accomplishments.
Well, speaking of Congress, both parties, especially in election time, there are some members or would-be members who spew utter nonsense, false information. How do we restore trust in elected officials? It seems people don't trust what politicians are saying. How do you restore it?
I'll be honest with you, that has been just beyond this election cycle, beyond the last election cycle. You guys here are also natives of Western PA. We know that people here don't trust politicians, and they genuinely shouldn't. In particular, we have had a representative here for the last 12 years who says he's got the real commitments to make sure that things are going to happen back here. In one appropriation cycle, Congressman Chris DeLuzio and Summer Lee brought back a capital B $1 billion to Pittsburgh. We have not gotten over $100 million in the last 10 years. It comes down to we don't have the same role to sit at the table here. We need to make sure that when we actually stand on saying we're going to do something, we accomplish it. We do what we need to do in terms of making sure that we, do what we run on. I'm running on bringing back manufacturing jobs, bringing back the union way of life, bringing back opportunities for people to have a better future in this area. And that's what I'm going to spend my time in Congress doing. I'm not going to go try to throw out votes. I'm not going to go try to insider trade. The only thing that I have to focus on entirely is making sure that opportunities are coming back to Western Pennsylvania, because that's what we need. I have too many of my friends and family who are working so hard every single day that don't have the opportunities that people in Chicago and other larger cities do, and enough is enough. We need real representation.
That we're about wrapping up here. Is there any issue that you'd like to talk about? Is there a top issue that you want to see addressed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably the biggest issues that I see right now is healthcare. I mean, this area, in particular up and down this district, is dealing with two big problems. One, we're an aging district, and also two, we're having a lot of our rural healthcare being bought up. I was just down in Sharon right now, where Sharon Regional is dealing with bankruptcy issues, and they're seeing some of these other larger conglomerates trying to come in and buy up the operation. We, throughout Pennsylvania, are seeing rural healthcare and healthcare just generally becoming more unaffordable and more inaccessible. I talked to the chair of Greene County, right? There is not an OBGYN in Greene County and the surrounding counties touching Greene County. We're talking about 6 counties in the heart of Pennsylvania that do not have access to an OBGYN. She had to drive an hour and 25 minutes one way to actually get health care. So many people in this area are in such similar circumstances just because of transportation issues, just because of some of the other problems. Addressing healthcare and making sure that people have accessible, affordable healthcare is one of my key issues. Making sure we address education, and then also making sure that jobs are secure, bringing back those opportunities that people have been saying for so long. I've got a chance to work Center COG in DC and see what happens there. The only people that I want to answer to are the people here in Western Pennsylvania, and bringing those opportunities back home is how we can actually forge a better future.
Well, thank you very much. We've been speaking with Preston Nouri, the Democratic candidate for the 16th District of Pennsylvania for Congress. I'm Keith Gushard, and on behalf of Rick Green, the editor of the Meadville Tribune, we thank you for joining us, and have a good day.